wanted to see how I could step forward with the exploration of, AI and cybernetics. When it came to, utilizing Jupyter notebooks and running software, I really came to a conclusion that I really didn't have anything else I really wanted to explore. Um, there's really nothing there to look into because ultimately, if I really wanted to look into if the models that they're presenting actually work, I would need to actually look under the hood of whatever they have now, which is under lock and key. For the most part, it looks like they're using some neural networks, but they're using a sophisticated search algorithm and then utilizing neural networks for partially some of the tasks that's being completed and done. But I don't see like a fully independent system. That's the best way I can explain it. Hopefully, more math and more papers will come out explaining this because it is not just running on the shell neural networks and LLMs that you see people break down. The first thing I want to take a look at, though, is how I'm going to progress this series in a way that is actually understandable and not just talking at people. Because honestly, I'm just tired of people ranting and just like pointing at news things. Oh my God, look at what they're doing. They're so stupid, whatever it might be. And I just really just want to explore things my own self. So one of the things is, what can I do to really explore this topic beyond the mundane? And I realize is because I have other stuff that I do. And one of that is I have a branding business and a creative business and creative direction. And at one time, I had interns, and I chose to always look for interns who had a design background because it was just a lot easier to get them to sort of understand concepts as it relates to people. But as an experiment, I got someone who's traditionally trained in marketing and someone who is trained in design. And I'm not going to really get into productivity. I think that could be another video, or maybe I want to explore it at all about how people complete projects and how people learn. I think I've already said this what education is. People look for the simplest path to getting the job done and getting the grade versus actually exploring that. They try to do this in PhDs, but PhDs still get reduced down. You don't want to waste your money and your time, so you always end up compromising a lot. And you don't get as much guidance as you think. I'm not going to get into that. And as of now, I don't have a PhD. And my, exploration of these topics was when I just went to community college. I know it blows people's minds because, the foundation is not there. To have this level of education, they would expect me to have a couple of degrees and have like tutors and stuff like that. But, there is something called natural selection beyond what you are seeing. Okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is language, because that is one of the things that seems the LNM seems to pretty much sort of grasp enough to get people to say, okay, maybe there's something to this. And one of the things I want to take a look at is the English language. I mentioned Shakespeare in the beginning of these videos, a series of these videos. I have a sonnet that I like, it's 123, and it's about time. But of course, when I read it, I'm reading it in modern English. So I had to think about, well, what are the first concepts of getting getting language and putting it into a systemized system, right? And one of the first things to do is that you need to standardize everything. So really, whenever you're looking at computers, you're not really looking at a computer, you're looking at an entity that requires information to be put into certain segments so it can be digestible versus the institution or entity being shaped by the people as they interact with it, because that doesn't happen. As I interact more and more with my computer, I don't get to change it in any sort of way because there is an institution that creates whatever this computer is. Now, at one point in time, in the early beginning stages, You could do a lot more. That's the reason why people like Linux. But ultimately, because it's an institutional, I told you about Data General, where, the guy went into the competition's workspace and was able to actually look at how the computer was set up. It's hardware. So how the inside was set up was actually showed how the company itself is created, which ultimately is what I taught my interns when it came to branding and marketing. I was like, if you want to understand the software or understand social media, you have to understand the people, not the software. Okay? So I want to show you traditional Chinese typewriting. And when I saw this, I was like, it's the language. That's why the language itself has already been minimized, not Chinese, but actually the modern English has been minimized enough to get it into a almost machine-like precision because there's logic behind it. Okay, so that is the Chinese typewriter, and this is Japanese typewriter. And if you know more than one language, especially languages that are really not they have a different structure, a way you would say something is completely different. You understand that translation is not interpretation. So as you see translation happening on YouTube that's automatic, they have all the information, should be correct. It's not, because that's not interpretation. Okay? Now I want to talk about a little bit about Old English. So this is like unrecognizable. If you try to put this in, it's like, what is going on? Because this, like the word structure, the words has been used, the alphabet itself has been changed so much that it doesn't really have the same sort of structure as the original, right? And also the order of the words. Okay, so if you know anything about like Jewish language, there's different um, sections of Judaism, but words are beyond what you speak them. They have deeper meanings, right? So places and orders and how things are interpreted is very important. Some languages don't have, well, more modern day languages don't have or are missing expressive language, like more of like introvert poetry and things like that. That's the missing. So in anthropology, we learned about these women who created their own language because they were living in a situation, a very modern day situation, to where a lot of their expressions and stuff was being restricted, so they created their own language. Okay, getting away from that. Latin is also very interesting. At Latin, and there's different versions of Latin, is much more flexible than English. When I tell you that the English that you're taught now is so restrictive and standardized, it's crazy. And they wonder why people don't understand like how to actually read literature or to write, because it is too standardized and it's too restrictive. You really don't have a lot to interpret because it is very explicit. As you can see, the order as far as Latin goes, which is fairly, it's, I wouldn't say close, but it's very indicative of English. See, the dog right here is at the end versus the dog here. So me learning a little bit about Latin was freeing to my mind, because you did not have to restrict yourself to these particular orders. You don't know how restrictive this stuff is. And when you start looking at older documents, even with the formation of, let's say, America, Bill of Rights and all that, and Constitution, you'll see that there's a lot of discrepancies because we're not restricted to using a particular comma, period, everything absolutely perfect. There's really no such thing as that. You used it, but it's not restrictive. As soon as it goes down to the general of public of people, it becomes very standardized. This is correct. This is wrong. This is how you do things. You can't do it this way. And then maybe I'll show you guys in another video how they did math, some basic like elementary math, and how just using a different method of calculation changes how your mind thinks about math. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about cybernetics. Okay, because technically, once upon a time, cybernetics was considered keyboards and mouses, and this is a pretty cool demo if you have not seen it. And it's basically the precursor to the laptop or the keyboards and Zoom technology that you see now. It basically goes into lists. It goes into um, video conferencing. Let me actually see if I can show you guys where he actually was talking to. Yeah, so he's doing like a video conference right now. Let me go back because he had it pulled up like on the screen. There you go. So that's him doing video conferencing, and this is a pretty cool video. Pretty awesome. But as you noticed in the beginning, there's something called augment, like an augmentation. So technically, having keyboards and mouses is a cybernetic concept, right? So what is cybernetics? I think he does a really great job at breaking down cybernetics because ultimately it was just a precursor to another system that then got rebranded into what we call cybernetics now. So here's another video you can look at. Okay. Okay, so this lady is talking about a cybernetic approach to planetary changes. And she is actually piggybacking the work of her father and actually saying that a cybernetic approach to uh, ecology is, a way to go, right? So I want to show you something else of mine. This is one of the last courses I took, which is anthropology, and it's ecology and cybernetics. And I argue that cybernetics is we're already in a cybernetic system. Because we have institutions who are mandated by their systems and not by the people. Because ultimately, whenever you're talking about anthropology, you're talking about those who are chosen. But if you restrict something, let's say Mad Max, where somebody's turning the water on and off and manipulating the system, killing these people, create the genocide here, you're going to basically create what I call a synthetic or manipulated natural selection or synthetic selection, where it is the players who do not want to give over control to another group of people or want to limit them by then basically kicking them out of the game so they don't evolve whatsoever. That's their goal. And ultimately, if you think about it, most minority groups, if you look at all the things, including like medicine, access to hospitals and things like that, they should have not seceded because you have diseases that require vaccinations, and then the vaccinations were manipulated. So ultimately, these things, but still, there's a natural selection that happened that said these people will continue on. So even amongst the synthetic selection, you have natural selection overturning these decisions, which is quite probably scary for the people who are trying to use whatever it is, because to them it's very logical that you will move in one. We understand the system. We can use this logic to do this. And people when you think about this, you can think about, cultures that want to be successful and they want to eliminate certain people. I don't know how nicely to say it, but it's like in anthropology, you have to look at this with an open mind and look at things as they are versus, restricted. Okay, so it might be a little heavy, but I want to basically say that we already live in a cybernetic system, and the cybernetic system is not the computer itself, but the people creating the systems. Okay, very clear. Maybe I'll release this paper. Okay, and then you have someone saying that cybernetics is that. And when I spoke to them about this, they looked at me like I was crazy, and they actually didn't understand what cybernetics was, and I had to explain what cybernetics is to them, because I didn't know what cybernetics was, which is nuts to me. Okay? So, this also talks about cybernetics. I don't know his political views, but he talks about computer science, cognitive science, and cybernetics. Okay? Um, so these are some things you can explore. Basically, I'm saying I'm not the only person in the entire world that understands that this is actually a system, okay? And that there is some sort of system that interacts and responds and keeps its cells in equilibrium. But these are different views, okay? So we go back to logic. To write is to diminish. And there is a basic mathematical um, system that is, if this, then that, if not this, then that. And you'll see this in like equations. This AB equals if C plus A plus B. Okay? So that's what I can explain it. So that is sort of how these systems are able to somewhat get a pretty good output, is because there's usually some sort of underlying diminishing factors to the language. Now, diminishing can be a good thing if you're trying to convey information to someone explicitly without confusion, because it's important. You're trying to get this person to do something or to move out of a dangerous place. You want to not leave things into interpretation. But when you're dealing with learning processes, then you have to leave those pathways open. Otherwise, you're going to get a very much cybernetic, systematic way of learning, which is either this is real or it's not real, this is false, or this is not true. Okay? And because the English language is very logical, when I was learning SQL, it was the only coding where I actually wrote out. Like I would go get a piece of paper and actually write, select, table this, table this, table this, where, whatever the conditions are. And then you would have group by, which had to do with aggregation, or order by, which is non-aggregation. It's just descending or ascending. And it was the only language that I actually went and got a piece of paper and wrote, because it was a logical language. It had a linear flow, beginning, middle, and end. And then you have CTEs and your search queries and all that good stuff. So the reason why you're getting such a great, or I would say pretty okay, believable output from the system is because the language itself is already diminished. So I did a copy of a product that I'm doing, right? And I write a certain way. I don't write standard wise, unless it's like SEO or something, and really I'm moving away from that because it doesn't work. It basically was like, do you want to create a product description? Because I asked it to just correct the grammar. It always does this. And I said, you know what? Sure. Okay, use this as an example. And it basically got the information and put it into a product demo. This is so easy to apply. These are the benefits. I don't write like that. Like, this particular kind of service is not about ease of use. It's not about a benefit. To be ease of use, it depends on the person. Like, if you've been doing this, using a product like this for a long time, it's easy. If you don't, then it's not going to be easy. So to say it's ease of use is a lie. It's made to measure, or it's bespoke or custom. So I'm not trying to convince people how easy it is. That's not the goal. But it learns its language from, I guess, what I think is a search engine, a algorithm, like a smart algorithm, and then the neural networks together. So maybe the neural networks pulls information from the text and paragraphs, and then it goes into a algorithmic and then a search, and then eventually it gets results. That's the way I think it does. So from there, I want to actually do some exercises to get you guys to start thinking about software has a version of cybernetics, because in order to, let's say, create a business card or create a letter, you have to understand the dimensions of the paper and how to, open up a piece of software and get it and manipulate it so it can actually come into fruition the right way in the real world. And in learning that, you can kind of understand the misses that happens whenever you are trying to apply a system in a world it doesn't understand, has never experienced before, and doesn't have the ability to experience. Rather than to focus on whether or not it's going to work or not, because it's not been put in, it's not an actual tool for learning. Like if they created a decent search algorithm that wasn't too manipulative, you could probably get the information you need and digest the information as you need it appropriately. But because these things don't really, I'm not going to get into it. It doesn't really work as well as you think it does. It's seemingly that this new solution is a solution to all the other problems, and in fact, it is not. And rather than to sort of complain about it, I'm going to actually show you guys how it works creatively. I hope that makes sense. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.